these, but families who have been part of Studebaker since the days of high-stepping thoroughbreds, proud carriages, and hand craftsmanship. Here's the modern survival of the old guild spirit, father and son united in a common craft. Tools and methods have changed greatly during those passing years, but the standard of the craft remains unchanged. Theirs is a stern code, nothing but the finest.
Hollywood preview of the Studebaker champion in action. Cliff Berger, motion picture stuntman and Indianapolis Speedway pilot, gives us the inside story of the car that makes new motoring headlines. Hold your hats, here we go. No scientific testing here, just plain slam-bang motor car mauling. Yet it tells in a minute the results of 4 years of designing and building to an ideal. Look at that car hang on. You'd expect it to tip over. Probably the ordinary car would, but the champion doesn't carry the dead weight of ordinary cars. Here is perfect balance that makes the champion hold its footing in spite of this whirling dervish driving. You don't have to be an engineer to appreciate this demonstration of roadability. Look at those wheels dance. And notice, too, that the body rides smoothly and evenly. In slow motion, the terrific punishment becomes even more apparent. There's no road in the world as rough as this, but the champion takes it in stride. Now, the factor of reduced, unsprung weight assumes great significance. No wonder automotive engineers call this the newest car in the world. It takes courage to perform feats like this, and when that car crashes down on its front wheels, it takes the rugged strength of planar suspension to stand up. What's this? A rollover? Oh, no. Watch it again in slow motion. See how the low center of gravity pulls this car back on all fours. Now for the climax. At 70 miles an hour, the new champion leaps into the American scene. The strongest, safest, most economical car in the lowest priced field. Champion in every phase of performance. And champion in the ability to stand up and take it. A Studebaker through and through. And every inch a champion.
From the highways of peace to the skyways and roadways of war. From America's great manufacturing organizations have come the materials and implements of war necessary to victory. This picture is a graphic record of the war activities of one of these organizations, Studebaker. It shows achievements of which all Studebaker men and women may well be proud. Remember the boastful, arrogant days when Berlin reveled in orgies of victory parades and feasted on the loot plundered from helpless people?
My dear friends across the channel, this is Lord Haw-Haw, speaking to you from Berlin. The American claims are simply preposterous. America will build 100,000 airplanes a year. America will manufacture 100 million guns. 45,000 tanks. 500,000 military trucks. Fat, smug, greedy Americans, depriving themselves of all their luxuries to do that? Are you really so gullible as to believe such lies? Such fantastic impossibilities? What do Americans know about building war weapons comparable to the products of our great Axis factories? It's a miracle that simply can't happen, you know, no matter how much you wish it could. The decadent democracies are doomed. Throw out your politicians and beg for peace while you can. Before a single American gun or tank or truck or airplane or bomb ever strikes at Germany, this war will be over. Berlin will never be bombed. Der Führer has promised.
But bombs did fall. Factories, whole cities were wiped off the map. These things happened.
London. The Berlin radio has just gone off the air. That probably means British and American bombers are smashing at German cities again. And on the other side of the world, Sydney. Flying fortresses rout another Jap convoy, sinking a heavy cruiser and downing 18 Jap fighters. Fairbanks. Continuous supplies pouring into Alaska over the Alaska Highway make future attacks on Alaska improbable. Washington. Aircraft engine output reaches a new high, according to official figures just released. Yes, the headlines carry good news today. All over the globe, in Europe, the Pacific, Russia, in India, and China. The enemy has felt the righteous might of this great nation aroused to its full fighting fury. We did what the Axis said couldn't be done. In a few short years, we outstripped a generation of preparation for war by our enemies. How we did it is a big story behind the headlines. As an example, let me tell you about the war activities of just one manufacturer, Studebaker. America's oldest manufacturer of highway vehicles, this company owes its greatness to intelligent, vigorous management, quality workmanship, and widespread distribution of its products. Led by Studebaker's aggressive management, here peace-loving Americans have turned from their accustomed ways of life to join in the battle to bring freedom and peace back to the world.
What do Americans know about building war products, comparable to the products of our great Axis factories?
Enough to more than meet the production schedules you laughed at, Lord Haw-Haw. American-built and powered airplanes have darkened the battle skies like blackbirds rising over Middle Western cornfields in the fall. In these plants, the men and women of Studebaker have had a share in making war headlines. Headlines about the Flying Fortress, for it was Studebaker's job to build reliable Wright Cyclone engines which give these dreadnoughts of the sky their life and power. Each Flying Fortress engine weighs but little more than 1 pound for each horsepower it develops. Compare this with a ratio of from 6 to 10 pounds per horsepower in automobile engines built just before the war. This engineering principle of getting the greatest possible amount of power from engines of the least possible weight was nothing new to Studebaker engineers. To get light weight and high power, lightweight metals had to be used whenever possible in these air-cooled Wright Cyclones. All parts had to be reduced to a basic minimum, machined and finished for maximum strength. Working with new metals and new machines and new techniques presented many difficult problems to Studebaker production men. But they were so thoroughly grounded in the principles of quality workmanship that they were able to turn from the manufacture of automotive engines to Flying Fortress engines with efficiency and dispatch. For instance, this rough crankshaft forging, weighing over 100 pounds, is reduced to less than half that weight. All excess metal is machined off, inside and out. Great care must be taken to see that there are no abrupt contour changes where dangerous stresses might be concentrated. During machining and finishing, this rough crankcase forging is reduced to about 1/4 of its original weight. These two halves fit together perfectly when they are assembled. By maintaining such precision and accuracy, dependability is built into Flying Fortress engines. Among the new machines which had to be designed is this amazing Greenlee. It is 175 feet long. It machines 135 cylinder heads at a time. Banks of lights on an indicator board flash on to show the progress of the heads as 168 operations are performed on each head passing through. Automatic equipment of this type is typical of the way the American automobile industry answered Lord Haw-Haw. Step by step, skilled hands operating fine machines make thousands of engine parts ready for assembly. On this production line, cylinder heads and barrels are assembled and fittings are put on. Studebaker workmen have been trained to produce quality products in quantity. They make every moment count as the cylinders take shape. Precision comes first in every operation such as this. Each gear tooth must be perfectly formed and machined to exact size. Nothing can be left to guesswork. These gears must match perfectly with parts which may have been manufactured miles away in another Studebaker plant. All Fortress engine parts must be interchangeable. 2 master rods at a time are milled in this machine, again to save production time and costs. But it takes more than an automatic machine to make these master rods perfect. Skilled workmen carefully hone the rods until they have a polished finish. Each finished rod must pass a test for delicate balance and exact size. All parts of the engine are built to close tolerances to assure absolute interchangeability. The same painstaking care goes into the shaping of the articulating rods and into the finish of the propeller shaft. There are many gears in these engines, and since each gear, big or little, is an essential cog in the operation of the power plant, it must be carefully checked to assure uniform quality, because the power of an engine flows through its gears. From the gear blanks to the machined finished gears, inherent quality must be uncompromisingly maintained so that a smooth flow of power will be delivered to the propeller. On the assembly line, complicated patterns of gears mesh perfectly. The engine begins to take form as the pistons are put in place. There are over 8,000 separate pieces which have to be accurately assembled before the engine is ready to be put on a test stand. When assembled, every engine is given an initial running test for 4 hours, after which it is completely torn down. Then the inspected parts are reassembled, and the engine is made ready for its final test run. In this final run, the engine must pass rigid performance requirements to the complete satisfaction of the test engineers. Then it is certified as ready for installation in a flying fortress. When prepared for shipment, bags of dehydrating compound are attached to the engine, and it is encased in plyofilm. As a further step to assure protection for every engine in shipment, the air is pumped out of the plyofilm envelope before it is sealed. When properly sealed and boxed, these engines may be stored or shipped and exposed to all kinds of weather without damage. Some of them go direct to plants where flying fortresses are assembled. Others arrive at this Studebaker plant on the West Coast. At this plant, the boxes are opened. The protective plyofilm cover is cut open and slipped down. The engine is mounted on a cradle and swung into position on this conveyor line, and the engine mount is attached. On this conveyor line, all accessories and connections are added. What part will this engine play in our battles for victory? Maybe Lord Haw Haw could answer that.
America will build 100,000 airplanes a year. America will manufacture 100 million guns. Ha!
So you thought it couldn't happen, Lord Haw Haw. At no time since Studebaker began building flying fortress engines has fortress production been stopped or even delayed because engines were not available. This is a record of which the men and women of Studebaker may be justly proud. Let me tell you something about a few of these people. It will help you understand why every Studebaker production schedule has been met, fully and promptly. For instance, Gerald Francis Griffin has 4 sons in the service, 1 missing in action. Working with him at Studebaker is his daughter Mary. Her job is inspection. This is Mrs. Mary Sheets. She has 5 sons in the service. Mrs. Nicodemus took Paul's place when he entered the service. Paul worked for Studebaker 12 years before he joined the Army Air Forces as a mechanic on flying fortresses. Sweeping up chips for scrap metal may not look like an important job, but it is to Matteo Gianorio, who has a good reason for wanting to make every ounce of metal count. His son is a bombardier in a flying fortress. This is Mrs. Marguerite Gaw. When her only son went into the Army, he wrote Studebaker asking for a war job for his mother. Father and son combinations are a tradition at Studebaker, America's oldest manufacturer of highway vehicles. Henry Ryan is proud of his 20 years of service with Studebaker. And he's proud of his son, Cyril, who is the assistant foreman of a department. Here's Fred Henry, who has worked at Studebaker for more than half a century. He started in January 1890. Fred works with these other veteran employees who have been with the company an average of 32 years. They work in the automotive plant, where big, multiple drive military trucks are built. Trucks which have helped write new pages of history. Yes, the roadways of the world are worn deep with Studebaker wheel marks. And these big military trucks are crisscrossing the earth with ruts where wheels may never have rolled before. On the great 800-acre Studebaker Proving Ground, utilized by the Army Ordnance Department, these trucks and other military vehicles are put through punishing road tests, arranged to duplicate conditions under which they must operate in the field with troops. Washboard roads test the spring action and the axle suspension and the sturdiness of the frame and body. Here, Studebaker trucks prove they can take it. Studebaker has become one of the world's largest truck manufacturers. Tens of thousands of powerful heavy-duty military trucks have streamed forth from its production lines to transport tremendous quantities of supplies for the armies of the United Nations all over the globe. And these trucks have set up new standards of performance under battle conditions. On the Alaska Military Highway, for instance, across mountain gorges, muskeg swamps, rocky washes, and through miles of northwest wilderness, the Alaska Highway became an all-year supply line for Alaska and the Aleutians. Over this 1,600-mile military road, from the day it was opened, columns of Studebaker trucks hauled thousands of tons of vital materials through all kinds of weather and road conditions. In winter, the trucks operate in temperatures as low as 60 degrees below zero, over a highway piled with snow and ice. In summer, the trucks plow through drifts of fine, loose gravel and abrasive dust. And the drivers have to wear dust masks. At regular intervals along the road are control stations where trucks are stopped and drivers changed. Day and night, the loaded trucks roll on. Trucks have to be tough to take this kind of constant pounding. Pausing only long enough to get gas, they plunge down grades, past road building equipment, and onto freight terminals. Here, as on the fighting fronts, armies depend on rugged, reliable trucks. Allied armies have rolled a victory on the wheels of trucks, carrying men, ammunition, and supplies over some of the toughest terrain in the world. So many Studebaker trucks have been delivered to Russia that returning correspondents say the Russians call all trucks Studebakers, irrespective of make. As could be expected of this progressive organization, Studebaker did its share in producing new surprises for the enemy. When the full story of the war is finally written, even then no one will know how many more days it might have lasted, how many more American lives might have been lost, had it not been for these mighty bombers. The eagles of the air, the flying fortresses, were everywhere. Over Europe, Africa, and Japanese strongholds, they carried our answer to the aggressors who wanted war. The target may have been a Japanese convoy sneaking through the islands of the South Pacific, or a column of enemy mechanized fighting equipment running for cover, or an enemy manufacturing center hundreds of miles away from the battle lines. But wherever the target, when the flying fortresses came overhead dropping bombs, there was terror and destruction under them.
Berlin will never be bombed. Der Führer has promised.
Look for Der Führer's empty promises in the ashes of Hamburg, Essen, and Berlin. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. But the gallant crews did not fly alone. With them went the prayers of the folks back home. The folks who built the engines and planes which carried them on their mission. and the hearts and very souls of the men at the base who waited for their return.
It's been 20 minutes since the others got in. It'll get back.
It's a funny thing about me working on airplane engines built by Studebaker. First engine I ever worked on was in a Studebaker car. I learned to drive with a Studebaker.
Damn it, shut up. Listen.
My dad works in the Studebaker plant. I guess I will too someday. They're sure fine cars. There wasn't anything wrong with the engine when I started to tear ours down. It was dead sore. I just wanted to see what it looked like inside. I was just a kid.
Shut up, you're driving me nuts.
I'd sure like to see the new airplane plants Dad wrote me about. If I wasn't here, I'd be working there with him. It's funny, me building fortress engines.
Here it comes. Hear it? I'd know those engines anywhere.
I told you they'd make it. They must have been sightseeing on the way back or chasing a gal.
Come on, you bunch of gabby old hens.
This looks more like a hunting lodge than a United States Army Training Center, but it's really Camp Hale, high up in the mountains of Colorado. You see, when you're fighting a global war, men and machines must be prepared to travel over all sorts of terrain in all kinds of weather. And here's the machine that will do just that. The famous Weasel you've heard about and read about. One of war's unique developments in the field of transportation. The Army describes it as a troop and supply carrier, but the men who build it and the GIs who use it call it the Weasel. Like its namesake, the Weasel can travel stealthily and swiftly over the most treacherous of ground surfaces. Now you see this amazing versatile vehicle on the screen for the first time. For it was a carefully guarded military secret for 2 years after Studebaker started production. The Army ski troopers 14,000 feet above sea level. Let's hear more about the Weasel. It was conceived on May 17, 1942. The day Army officers and government officials came to South Bend and said to Studebaker engineers something like this. Gentlemen, we want a vehicle that will travel over snow and ice and frozen rocky ground, wherever a dog team will go. It must be small enough and light enough to be transported by airplane if necessary. What about it? Can you build it for us? Well, Studebaker's answer came just 34 days later with the delivery of the first pilot